The insanity that was 2024? Let's start with the art world, which over the centuries has given humanity so many beautiful, timeless masterpieces. This year, the biggest story involving art was that a cryptocurrency businessman paid $6.2 million at a Sotheby's auction for a banana, which he ate. It's much better than other bananas, he told the press. And that was not the stupidest thing that happened in 2024. It might not even crack the top 10, because this was also a year when the Olympics awarded medals for breakdancing. Fully grown adults got into fights in Target stores over Stanley brand drinking cups. Expectant couples continued to insist on revealing the genders of their unborn children by blowing things up instead of simply telling people. Hundreds of millions of Americans set all their clocks ahead in March, then set them all back in November, without having the faintest idea why. But what made 2024 truly special in terms of sustained idiocy, it was an election year. This meant that day after day, month after month, the average American voter was subjected to relentless messaging created by political professionals who all share one core belief. The average American voter has the intellectual capacity of a houseplant. It was brutal, and it felt as though it would never end. In fact, it may still be going on in California, a state that tabulates its ballots on a broken Etch-a-Sketch. For most of us, though, the elections and this insane year are finally over. But before we move on, let's take one last look back at 2024, starting with January. Imagine waking up on a cold January morning in 2024, only to find yourself trapped in what feels like a 1980s low-budget horror flick. Picture this: a group of kids, played by the major political parties, find themselves in a creepy, dilapidated house. The only sane thing for these kids to do is to get the hell out of there. But instead they pause by the doorway leading to the basement. Despite the fact that the audience, played by the American public, is shouting, "Don't go down there, just leave the house, you idiots!" The kids make the fateful decision to descend into the basement. What they find is a nightmarish scenario that makes everyone scream, "Oh God, no!" Welcome to January 2024, a month that felt like a twisted version of Weekend at Bernie's. Thanks to our political system, under which the nominees for the most powerful office in the world are chosen by approximately 97 people across 6 rural states, America finds itself facing a choice between the proverbial cat lady and a businessman who enjoys trolling the left on social media. Both candidates come with a truckload of baggage. Trump is wanted on criminal charges in something like 12 states, and if elected, promises to gut the federal government. On the flip side, President Biden keeps saying words that do not appear in any known language and gives the impression that any day he's going to shuffle into a press briefing wearing only an ice cream cone. In other words, we have one candidate who lost an election but claims he won it, and another candidate who won the last election but can't remember anything without sniffing a kid first. America, the choice is yours. Meanwhile, the nation is facing a slew of serious problems. Foremost among them is the situation on the border with Mexico, which at one time was a separate nation from America, but is now basically the front porch. This has resulted in a confrontation between the feds and Texas, which is alarming because, according to military analysts, Texas has way more guns. In government news, the Pentagon faces harsh criticism for taking more than 3 days to notify the White House that Defense Secretary Lloyd J. Austin III had been hospitalized. This prompts the administration to check up on the rest of the cabinet, only to discover that at least 4 other secretaries are missing, and one died 3 years ago. Abroad, fighting continues to rage in both Ukraine and Gaza, although these conflicts are no longer getting a ton of attention in the US media because of all the news being generated by Taylor Swift. In a troubling aviation incident, an Alaska Airlines Boeing 737 MAX 9 flying at 16,000 feet suddenly develops a refrigerator-sized hole in the fuselage when an improperly attached panel blows off. As a safety precaution, the Federal Aviation Administration advises passengers on other Boeing aircraft to avoid sitting near windows. For its part, Boeing states that, at least the plane didn't lose a really important part, like one of the wings. And that's just the beginning. Buckle up, because the insanity of 2024 is just getting started. February. Apple launches the much-anticipated Vision Pro, a virtual reality headset with a revolutionary spatial computing system coupled with 12 cameras and a 15 million pixel display that makes anyone wearing it look like a moron. Special counsel Robert Hur concludes his year-long investigation into Joe Biden's handling of classified documents by releasing a report concluding that Biden could not be charged because he was not mentally fit to stand trial. And yet he was fit to stay president? An angry Biden immediately holds a press conference during which he heatedly denies her assertion and refers to Egyptian leader Abdel Fattah el-Sisi as the President of Mexico. In other White House news, CNN, after reviewing documents, reports that the Biden German Shepherd commander bit Secret Service personnel in at least 24 incidents, eclipsing the record previously held by Michelle Obama. Meanwhile, Donald Trump, who is appearing in court more often than most federal judges, is found guilty by a New York civil judge on charges of financial fraud, aiding and abetting, aggravated contempt, disorderly obstruction, second-degree vagrancy, and loitering with intent to conspire. The judge fines Trump nearly $500 million and bans him for the next 3 years from riding in any motorcade more than 6 cars long. In a highly controversial decision, the Alabama Supreme Court rules that frozen embryos are, for legal purposes, children, and therefore must immediately be thawed out and each provided with a PlayStation 5. In a Super Bowl for the ages, 2 teams compete against each other under the watchful gaze of Taylor Swift. As we move forward, every day seems to bring a new level of absurdity and chaos. Stay tuned, because this year is shaping up to be one for the history books. March. President Biden, seeking to dispel persistent rumors that he is an elderly man, delivers a State of the Union address consisting almost entirely of shouting. This performance does not improve his poll numbers, but it's a big hit with members of the Washington press corps, several hundred of whom decide independently to describe the speech as fiery. In their response, the Republicans elect to have Alabama Sen. Katie Britt deliver a disturbingly melodramatic talk from her kitchen. Yet another federal budget crisis is averted at the last minute when Congress passes a $1.2 trillion spending bill, which will enable the government to keep spending insanely more money than it takes in. The U.S. debt is now growing at the rate of $1 trillion every 100 days, but fortunately this is not a problem because it will be taken care of by future generations. In other news, Donald Trump's lawyers tell a New York court that he cannot raise the nearly $500 million he needs for an appeal bond. Trump gets a break when an appeals court lowers the amount to $175 million, which Trump says he definitely has. In aviation news, a Boeing plane flying from Australia to New Zealand suddenly goes into a nosedive, injuring 50 people. Another Boeing plane, taking off from the San Francisco airport, loses a piece of landing gear. A Boeing spokesperson says that the company, after conducting an in-depth review, has tentatively identified the root cause of the recent problems. "We think it's gravity," said the spokesperson. As we march forward into an increasingly surreal landscape, one thing remains certain. The line between reality and satire has never been thinner. April. The nation is enthralled by a total eclipse, a rare celestial occurrence in which the Earth, Sun, and Moon align in such a way as to cause a large number of people to deliberately travel to rural Ohio. A spectacular sight that most people will never witness again in their lifetimes unless they're still around at sunset. But amidst this cosmic wonder, earthly chaos continues. A magnitude 4.8 earthquake with an epicenter in central New Jersey rattles the Northeast. New York remains in the news with the onset of the single most exciting thing ever to happen to CNN, yet another trial of Donald Trump. In this one, he's charged with falsifying business records as part of a scheme to guarantee that every single human being on the planet would be aware that Trump had a one-night stand with porn star Stormy Daniels. At least that's how it worked out. South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, a contender to be Trump's running mate, bolsters her case with a new book in which she reveals, apparently on the advice of the same public relations firm used by Boeing, that she once shot and killed her family dog, Cricket. Noem's supporters note that she would be a handy person to have around the White House if Commander ever comes back. Speaking of commanders, President Biden, campaigning in Pennsylvania, states his uncle was eaten by cannibals after his plane went down during World War II. As the tragic situation in Gaza worsens, American college students on a growing number of campuses engage in protests and other dramatic actions intended to draw attention to the single most important issue facing the world: the feelings of American college students. May. Stormy Daniels takes the stand, detailing her encounter with Donald Trump at a 2006 celebrity golf tournament. Her testimony is graphic, but the courtroom gasps when she connects the encounter to falsified business records by his then lawyer. Trump, when not in court, continues his relentless campaign for the presidency. Meanwhile, Joe Biden's poll numbers plummet. Voters are increasingly frustrated with the economy, despite White House spokespersons insisting that inflation is no longer an issue, perhaps on whatever planet they reside. Here on Earth, prices for essentials like food, gas, and housing soar. Even the Met Gala isn't spared, with ticket prices skyrocketing from $50,000 to $75,000, leaving attendees donning what look like Halloween costumes from Temu. In a bizarre twist, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. seeks to distinguish himself from the major party candidates by revealing to the New York Times that doctors discovered a dead worm in his brain. As May winds down, Trump is found guilty on all 34 felony counts related to his business dealings. The specifics of the crimes remain elusive, yet the convictions are a boon for his campaign, a predictable outcome for anyone who understands Trump's unique appeal. June. The Biden re-election campaign struggles to change the public perception that the president is sometimes lost and confused. Democrats insist that Biden is sharp as a tack, but unfortunately the public never sees this because he only exhibits this sharpness when there are no cameras around. So there's a lot on the line when Biden and Trump square off in a primetime debate, which was proposed by the Biden campaign, apparently on the advice of Budweiser's ad agency. Biden spends much of the debate staring vacantly into the distance like a man who's trying to remember where he put the remote control. In short, it's a very bad night for Biden. It's so bad that even professional journalists can see how bad it is. In fact, suddenly, everybody in Washington is acutely aware of the president's decline, which previously had been apparent to only the entire rest of the world population. Trump, on the other hand, seizes the moment to hammer home his points with fervor, capitalizing on every opportunity to highlight Biden's perceived weaknesses. The debate becomes a spectacle, a microcosm of the larger battle for America's future, played out in real time on national television. As the debate concludes, the public is left more divided than ever, with supporters of both candidates digging in their heels. The stage is set for a tumultuous summer, with the fate of the nation hanging in the balance. Stay tuned as we navigate through the summer months where the drama and chaos are sure to escalate. July, the Democrats are in a state of panic. Behind the scenes, party leaders desperately want to get Biden off the ticket, but he repeatedly insists that he's going to be the candidate. Just when it appears that the presidential race cannot get any more insane, Trump goes to Butler, PA to hold a campaign rally for which the security has apparently been outsourced to the Boeing Corp. Trump is shot in the ear by a man who is somehow able to climb with a rifle onto the roof of a building that not only is within range of the speaker's platform, but also has 3 police snipers stationed inside it. Really. The attempted assassination shocks the nation but also bolsters Trump's popularity. He has a commanding lead in the polls as, a few days later, he accepts the presidential nomination at the Republican convention with a triumphant speech lasting slightly longer than med school. The Democrats are now in utter despair. Biden continues to insist that he's running. Then, in a sudden reversal, Biden, while sleeping, announces that he's quitting the race after reassessing the situation and waking up next to a severed head. Party leaders lavishly praise Biden for saving democracy, then decide, via what is undoubtedly a democratic process, to replace him with Kamala Harris. Other than that, it's a quiet month in politics. In other news, a massive worldwide internet disruption paralyzes the world when a Windows glitch causes more than 8.5 million computers to crash. The disruption winds up costing businesses an estimated $5 billion. As the Olympic Games get underway in Paris, tens of millions of viewers tune in to NBC to watch 3 action-packed weeks of Snoop Dogg reacting to French things. The Games take full advantage of the city's scenic venues, including the Seine River, which is used for the swimming leg of the triathlon race after health authorities assure competitors that intensive cleanup efforts have removed the vast majority of the turds. August. The race for the presidency kicks into high gear as fired-up Democrats hold their convention in Chicago. The first-day highlight is a farewell to President Biden, who finally wakes up and speaks in the prestigious 2:30 a.m. time slot and is never heard from again. The focus then shifts to the nomination of Kamala Harris, who is running on a platform of woke as well as a set of policies to be specified later, in stark contrast to the policies of whoever is running the country now. The convention gives Harris an immediate boost in the polls, and suddenly Trump faces a serious challenge. Meanwhile, the 2 vice presidential candidates, Tim Walz and J.D. Vance, engage in a spirited exchange on the issues, reminiscent of the Lincoln-Douglas debates. Walz: "You're weird." Vance: "I'm not weird. I'm a patriot. Walls, that is what makes you weird. 3 weeks later, Kennedy suspends his campaign and urges his followers to vote for Trump. In other news, 2 astronauts are stuck aboard the International Space Station when the Starliner spacecraft that was supposed to return them to Earth develops mechanical problems. You will never guess the name of the company that built this spacecraft. September, when suddenly, with no advance warning, the biggest issue in the presidential election is the question of whether Haitian immigrants are eating people's pets. Trump raises the issue in a televised debate with Harris, creating a media frenzy. For her part, Harris repeatedly stresses the message that she is a regular middle-class person from the middle class who totally relates to the problems faced by middle-class people like herself, and she definitely intends to fix these problems once she is elected to high government office. Harris is widely considered to be the winner of the debate, on top of which she is endorsed by Taylor Swift. A week after the debate, police capture a would-be assassin who was spotted with a rifle on a golf course where Trump was playing. There was a time in America when this event would be considered a big story, but in the hellscape that is 2024 politics, it dominates the headlines for considerably less time than the pet-eating Haitians. It's also an increasingly tense time in the Middle East, where Israel and Iran appear to be on the verge of all-out war. But the good news is that at least the hurricane season has been relatively peaceful. Okay, scratch that. In late September, Hurricane Helene causes horrendous devastation in 6 southeastern states. The storm leaves behind a trail of destruction, further complicating an already chaotic election season. October, Hurricane Milton ravages Florida, leaving a trail of unprecedented destruction. It's a brutally difficult time for millions of Americans, but the good news is that FEMA has spent the hurricane budget on housing and feeding illegal immigrants. In presidential election news, Trump makes a campaign appearance at a Pennsylvania McDonald's. Thanks to Trump's uncanny ability to drastically reduce the functional IQ of professional journalists, this event dominates the national political coverage for days. Somehow Trump survives all this journalism. He continues to crisscross the nation, promising tax breaks for pretty much every category of U.S. resident, including domestic animals, and giving increasingly improvisational speeches. In another suave outreach move, the Trump campaign, ever sensitive to accusations of racism, holds a rally in Madison Square Garden featuring a comedian who jokes that Puerto Rico is garbage. On the Democratic side, the Kamala Harris campaign settles on an upbeat closing message: whoever she is, she's not Trump. At exactly the same time Harris is making her big final pitch to voters, Joe Biden, who is still technically the president, somehow gains access to Zoom and lends the Harris campaign a helping hand by declaring, in response to the Trump rally Puerto Rico joke, that roughly half of the U.S. electorate is garbage. Meanwhile, in an issue that neither party talks about because fixing it would require political courage, the national debt goes over $35 trillion. Moving the nation still closer to the inevitable financial catastrophe that will leave future generations completely screwed. Fortunately, future generations are fine with this. Don't worry about it, they say. In space, a large communications satellite unexpectedly explodes, creating debris that threatens other satellites. In the spirit of mercy, we will not name the company that made the defective satellite. Hold on, everyone, we are almost there. What could possibly happen in 2 months? November, the voters finally go to the polls for the most important American election ever. All the expert political analysts and professional pollsters agree that the race is extremely tight, a dead heat, especially in battleground states. The experts are certain of this. On election night, the TV networks are teeming with political commentators prepared to analyze the numbers far into the night, as the nation settles in for the long, grueling process of determining the winner. A process that everyone agrees could go on for days, possibly even weeks, because of the extreme razor-thin closeness of the... Never mind. In roughly the amount of time it takes to blow up a balloon, the networks determined that Donald Trump has decisively won the election, including all of the so-called battleground states. It's a massive failure by the expert analysts, who admit that they had no idea what happened. But in a matter of seconds, these experts pivot from being spectacularly clueless about what was going to happen in the election to confidently explaining what happened in the election. One theory is that it was not a great idea for the Democrats to insist that President Biden was fine until it was obvious that he was not, then replace him with a candidate who was not great at talking and who previously advocated positions that many Americans found distasteful, which is why they voted for Donald Trump. One branch of the Democratic Party accepts this theory, and begins the painful process of self-examination. Another branch prefers to believe that the party is fine, and the real problem is that most Americans are sexist, racist, fascist morons, which may not be a winning message for the Democrats going forward, but it does enable this branch to feel better about itself. For his part, Donald Trump has no doubt that the American people have given him a mandate to deport up to half of the U.S. population, including most of the Democrat Party. A controversial Trump nomination, this one for Secretary of Health and Human Services, is Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who used to think Trump was Hitler but now thinks he's great. Kennedy is deeply suspicious of vaccines, big pharma, the CIA, fluoride, seed oils, and chemicals in general. He also wants to make America healthy again by reducing the consumption of the over-processed junk foods that have turned many Americans into big fat tubs of lard. In environmental news, 70,000 world leaders, politicians, bureaucrats, aides, activists, consultants, celebrities, media people, caterers, chauffeurs, bodyguards, grifters, and private jet pilots gather for COP29, the conference held every year by the United Nations to solve the problem of climate change. The host nation is Azerbaijan, a corrupt authoritarian state whose main source of income is selling billions of dollars worth of oil and gas, who naturally wants everybody to stop using so much oil and gas. The conference is once again a huge success as measured in the metric tons of bacon-wrapped kittens eaten. The Australian Senate passes a law banning children under 16 from social media. December arrives and with it a final month of chaos to cap off an already tumultuous year. Joe Biden, who repeatedly promised that he would not pardon his son Hunter, cements his legacy as the most corrupt president ever by pardoning his son Hunter. The Democratic Party is forced to change its mantra from "nobody is above the law" to "hey, it's complicated." The wording of the pardon document is quite broad, covering all offenses committed between 2014 and 2025, including any currently unsolved murders or rapes of underage prostitutes. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is acting as though he's already the president, meeting with foreign leaders, signing treaties, and vetoing legislation. Helping Trump with the transition is billionaire Elon Musk, who's going to make the federal government efficient by implementing measures such as having all federal employees actually show up for work and eliminating all inefficient government departments and personnel. By this time next year, we should be able to fit the entire federal government into one of those FEMA trailers. After numerous sightings of mysterious lights in the sky over New Jersey, government officials seek to calm an increasingly alarmed public. "We've investigated these lights, and there's absolutely nothing to worry about," states Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. In other news, a horrific crime on a New York City sidewalk leads to a national conversation about the U.S. healthcare system, which reveals that a truly disturbing number of people believe three things. 1. The healthcare system is bad. 1. Therefore murder is okay. 1. Especially if the murderer is good-looking. In conclusion, yes, we finally made it. Well, almost. But what could happen with just a few days left? Clearly, this year needs to end, which is why we're looking forward to New Year's Eve, when, in a beloved tradition, thousands of revelers will gather in Times Square to say goodbye to 2024. We like to think that on that night, as the seconds tick down to zero and that giant ball starts to descend, the people gazing up at it will all be united, if only for a moment, by a common hope, a hope shared by the millions of us watching on television. Specifically, the hope that the giant ball was not manufactured by the Boeing Corp. After all, we've had enough surprises this year. The last thing we need is for that ball to malfunction and turn our New Year's celebration into a scene straight out of a disaster movie. As patriotic Americans, we're tired of the crap coming out of our corrupt government and their shills in the mainstream media. We're ready for a fresh start, a new beginning. Now, I know I didn't add everything that happened this year. If I did, it would make this video 3 hours long. We had several tragic school shootings, a current administration trying to start World War III, South American prison gangs taking over apartment complexes, and the ATF murdering law-abiding citizens in pre-dawn raids. Hopefully next year will be much more mellow. We can only hope. Thank you for watching to the end of the video. Please like, subscribe, and share the video. If you really like my content, consider joining my channel as a member. Stay frosty, my friends. Keep your head down and your powder dry.